So lovely to be with you all. I'm going to start with a bit of a schizophrenic start, so I hope you'll bear with me here. I think that I started in sustainability about 10 years ago. Fordham was just mentioned. I lead a research center at Fordham, which is home to 50 fashion industry CEOs. They represent about 275 brands, so you can imagine the ripple effect of their power if they move together, if they think together on what does a responsible industry look like. I'm incredibly proud of what we've done in 10 years, and the schizophrenic part is I'm incredibly frightened about what we've not done and what we have to do. So I'm going to stand in the middle of a look back over the last 10 years and a wish for what I'm hoping is coming in the next 10. When we started, I started to knock on CEOs' doors and say, hey, where are we on sustainability? Rana Plaza was just around that time, and I got a lot of great guy down the hall that's doing CSR. Oh, I got a lady, she's running production. Somebody else was worried about it somewhere separate and apart from the business. Where we are today is quite different, but then nobody knew what a UN Sustainable Development Goal was. The idea that a CEO would ever be asked by an investor to talk about what are they doing on ESG, nobody knew how to spell even ESG at that time, was completely impossible. So if we project forward now to where we are, I think there is an amazing collision of what I would call stakeholder capitalism, a collision of stakeholder priorities, rather, I should say. So what we're seeing there is investors are now saying it is material, relevant to my investment in your business to know how does climate affect what you're doing and how are you affecting the climate. We see this coming with Securities and Exchange Commission, much more interest as we see not only from the investment side, but also the regulatory side. Regulatory bodies all over Europe are saying how much recycled content is there, are you labeling it properly, how are we enabling consumers to make choices? So you have all of these pressures coming from the regulation side. Employees now can work anywhere. We're all kind of unhinged post-COVID from where we can work. You can work anywhere in the world. What does that look like? Where do I want to be? What are the purpose-driven companies that I can work for and how am I choosing them? I don't want to just work. I would like to be part of a solution. So employees are creating a flow of pressure. And then you have consumers. This is always a tricky one. I do not believe somebody will buy a piece just because it's sustainable. They still have to like it, feel good at it, and all of the rest. I grew up in fashion. I think fashion is powerful. It makes you feel fantastic, as does beauty and so many of these connected industries. But consumers are now closing. The research is showing the say-do gap. It's not good enough to say, oh, I've heard it's better. Well, is it really better? They're scratching out that surface. They're putting things on Instagram. They are creating a cancel culture, which we all know, which now means you really have to be not just talking the talk, but walking in the walk. So consumers are creating. So with this idea of now we have investors, regulatory bodies, employees, and consumers pushing at the industry, a lot of change is now bubbling up and being forced. I think really interesting is what is the industry doing itself. So back to why are we proud? The foundation is now down. Everybody has set basically ESG goals. They know what they have to do. They have teams in place. They're used to investors asking, show about your progress. How do we demonstrate that data? So the industry has started to talk to each other. They're working collaboratively. The nonprofits are working collaboratively. Looking at AII here, there's a group of nonprofits in fashion conveners that have also come together to say, how do we facilitate? So now the question is, that's where we've been and where we are. Where do we want to go? So I'm going to talk a little bit about a project and what I hope is going to happen for the next 10 years and what I am imagining is going to happen in the room today, which is a project that has been nicknamed In the Box, and I'm going to explain why. It's really about accelerating partnerships, about convergence, about working specifically, whether it's within our industry or outside of our industry, to solve problems. And what does that look like? So a good friend who is not English as a first language speaker said, if we were in a room and had a big whiteboard, which happens to be one of my favorite things, somebody was laughing at me in the room before about that, we would put every problem we were trying to solve in a box. We know we need to go net zero. What are the projects that have to happen there? Is it what's going to happen in supply chain in the mills? Is it going to be regenerative agriculture? Is it going to be virtual power purchase agreements? Is it going to be supplier engagement programs? Super critical here is science-based targets. Now that everybody has committed and is looking how much of my impacts as a company are happening out in the scopes, we know we need to work on these boxes together if you think about net zero. Next box would be how do we manage preferred fibers, materials, materials? What are the innovations there? Lots of different things that are in the room here too. Who has to be in that box to solve those problems? We need innovators, we need financial people, and so on. Next box, circularity. How are we starting to think about selling products over and over and over again as an industry, and what does that look like? People are now planning their businesses in 3 ways. What do I sell with virgin and or recycled materials? What does my re-commerce look like? How do I take that back in-house? What does metaverse look like? So suddenly growing a business doesn't rely only on virgin raw materials, which makes it quite interesting. You can still grow, but do it in a way that values raw materials. Another box. Then we could go on to say dynamic planning. What can we learn from fast fashion? Fast fashion has started to test quickly, rapid fire. Is it going to sell? Isn't it going to sell before they produce? What are the learnings there? Interesting box. We could go on through all of the social ones. How do we expand digital education, and what does that look like? How do we learn from philanthropists like Gates, Rockefeller, and others to say, how are we quantifying the benefits of women's education? How are we scaling them? How can they help us to learn there? So you can imagine if we were all here in a room, box by box by box, and said, let's look at the pilots that have been run. How do we scale those things? Let's look at where there are gaps and welcome the innovators that are in the room and others and say, how are they going to help us close those gaps in those boxes? How do we exchange, map out, and move into this, what is the season of scale, very different than what's happened the last 10 years, which has been the foundation of let's figure out what we have to do and where are those impacts. So I would say the challenge for today is, as we all stand in the room, this is an incredibly powerful group of people with an outsized responsibility. We all have the ability to say, where's my opportunity to get in a box? What's my piece in the puzzle? Whether you're an innovator and you're saying, I have the ability, like Amino, to separate polyester from elastane, or I can recover your clothes, or I can create some kind of different work like Salty is doing with not using real feathers, but alternative feathers and so on. Take the time to go around, learn about these people, and then say, where's my box? Where's my opportunity to help? How can I get engaged there? How do I adopt an innovator and move us all forward? Because if we don't scale now, when we're looking at 2030 and 2025, which feels like it's in about 10 minutes, I think we're all going to land in a lot of trouble. So challenge is up, I think, upon all of us, and terrific to be with you all, and good luck to everybody. I hope you make a lot of love matches and create great opportunities together. Thanks so much.